All right, well, good evening and welcome to our second panel on with a discussion entitled When the Shepherd Needs Shepherded. And in ministry, it's a calling filled with purpose and with joy, but even shepherds sometimes, as we heard in the last panel, find themselves in need of care and encouragement and guidance. And so tonight what we're going to do is explore the often overlooked reality that pastors too need a safe place to be ministered to. So we're blessed to be joined by four pastors who bring both wisdom and honesty to this conversation. Pastor Carl Poole, whose steady leadership reflects a heart for caring deeply for people in Pickens County. Pastor Drew Federhoff, who offers a perspective shaped by his passion for authentic ministry and spiritual formation as he cares for people in his ministry. Pastor Brent Dongell, known for his commitment to both teaching and walking alongside the next generation of leaders. And Pastor Mike Shannon, who brings longevity of pastoral experience and a deep desire to see pastors thrive in every season of their ministry. So each of these men understands that even the strongest leaders need shepherding. And so tonight they're going to share from their journey to remind us that asking for help is not weakness. It's actually a part of the way God designed the body of Christ to function. So would you give a warm welcome to our panelists tonight? So we'll keep our responses concise so we can leave time for audience participation, and we'll begin with two main questions for the panel, then open the floor for their questions. Jonathan Evans shares in his book, Fighting Your Battles, Every Christian's Playbook for Victory, that the monstrous call that God has placed on our lives means that God has giants to defeat through you. The bigger your problem, the bigger your call. So because of this monstrous calling, Dr. Lewis shares that pastors must first recognize their need for a support system, which is the first step in building one. So in light of that, with a microphone there, where can pastors turn when they are exhausted or discouraged? Pastor Poole.
So for me personally, I have three seminary friends that we've been friends for 30 years, and that's been awesome to be able to stay in touch and encourage one another. We serve in churches in Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. So that's one group. Another one is I'm Southern Baptist, and I'm part of the Piedmont Baptist Association out of Easley, which is our central location. We have 50 churches, and of those 50 churches, once a month we get together for a luncheon, and we have about 20 to 25 pastors. So that's a pretty good, I think, representation. And we gather together, when we gather together each month, not to say how many people do you have on Sunday morning, or what building are you building, but how are you doing? You know, and I really appreciate that because there's not that competitiveness.
Yeah.
And then I also have a good friend, his name's Tom, and he's about 75 years old. His dad was a pastor. Once a month, he takes me out to lunch.
Wow.
And he did today. We went to lunch at a Mexican place, and he said my dad would be proud of me because his dad was a pastor, and we just have developed a good friendship. And that just really encourages me when I'm down to have those groups that I can depend upon.
Yeah. Pastor Drew.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a couple of different types of friends. The first is another pastor of similar experience, somebody right around the same area as you, so that you can struggle along with whatever's going on, somebody ahead of you, and then somebody behind you. So somebody who would be further along in ministry, or maybe as a spiritual mentor to you, as well as the person who's right alongside you, as well as somebody that you're mentoring, somebody that you're able to pull along through. I find that whenever I'm exhausted, I need to find somebody to serve, somebody to help. Whether it's helping at home with a project, or it's going down the street and seeing somebody raking leaves, just participating in something like that. Oftentimes, whenever I'm exhausted, I'm so focused on myself that to get out of that, looking at elsewhere, looking around the neighborhood, that kind of a thing can really make a difference. And sometimes that perspective of another person really makes a difference, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the variety of friends. So I think that's been huge. And so working with Next Gen especially, there's both the marriage side and the single side to that, right? So most of your younger students or pastors, some of them are not even married yet. So I think there are those different relationships and friendships. as I was thinking through that, it definitely helps to have dad or parents that have been pastors. So like the idea of family that can support you is huge. Beyond that, I would call it friends and furthers. Usually you need someone that's a mentor in your life that's further along that you can be open with, and usually someone your age as well. And I think that's the clause, so I'm sure we might get to the vulnerability, but there's a difference between just having someone you're meeting with versus someone you can actually open up fully with. Yeah. And so I think you can have rules, but if you're not fully opening up, it still may not be the support that you're really looking for and needing. And so there has to be that groundwork that's laid for that type of friendship or relationship with vulnerability and accountability. And then beyond even just the mentors, parents, or someone that covers you, and then friends, I have another one or two people that are just my fun friends. So it doesn't mean you can have fun in all those places, but sometimes it feels like if all these are serious meetings, it's nice to have that one friend where it's like, can we just go for a drive, or can we go play golf, or can we just do something, And so it doesn't mean you can't do that with anyone or everyone, but I've really valued a variety of colleagues, whether it's even the colleagues and staff I work with here or the pastoral side. And so the students, if they don't have a spouse, they really do need a core group of friends that operates kind of like core community, especially if they don't have a spouse, and then maybe not a huge support from family or family that's been in ministry. Like there is even a deeper need, I would say, for figuring that community out.
Yeah, I like that for the friends. Yeah.
Ditto. No, I would say I recognize that we all come from different backgrounds, and I know like one of the things we can always look at is the difference between an extrovert and introvert, and what's the real need there. I will say that I'm an introvert. Do I need a lot of people? I don't. But my ministry was a lot different. I spent most of my adult years in the military, and I would say that for me I did have those individuals that were ahead of me who would mentor me, but I also had these great friends that we were same rank, and we would always get together. Because in the military we have absolute confidentiality. So there's a lot of things that we had access to, or we were privileged to, that a lot of other people didn't and couldn't. And so that you're carrying a lot of stuff with you. I mean, it's stuff you can't even bring home to your wife,
Yeah.
So who do you go to? And that's where these fellow chaplains, whom I were friends with, same rank and everything. We all throughout my years, that's exactly the way it was. Even when we were stationed together, we still could call one another and help one another, encourage one another, email, all those kinds of things was extremely helpful for me, at least over the years.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, keep it there with Mike. He's like, oh no. What role does vulnerability play in your personal healing and resilience?
Well, I think that is a good question, and let's see what I wrote here. But I guess I would say that it is important to be vulnerable. I mean, I think it's important to be realistic about where you are in life and what you're faced with, right? And I think that reality, if you can. I'll be honest, there's a little bit of hesitancy on because I also realize we live in a broken, fallen world, and in that broken, fallen world, if you're too vulnerable and you bring it out in public, the reality is, I don't know if you've ever experienced, but I know the reality is that people will use that against you.
Yes.
And that's even more painful, So I guess it's really those close individuals, that you can put implicit trust in, that you can go and be vulnerable to. But there are times when I also think from the pulpit, you can say, hey, this is my struggle, this is where I'm at, and let the congregation know, hey, you're just as human as they are. And because the reality is that we all are on this journey together, and to love God with our heart, soul, strength, and mind, to honor Him, glorify Him. And so we're all there is this reality in which we are all need to be vulnerable at some level and help one another, encourage one another.
Yeah, I like that.
This question's around vulnerability and its role specifically. Yeah, a few things that come to mind. I agree with what Dr. Shannon said over here, Mike, Pastor Shannon. I remember as a young adult pastor opening up to someone, but maybe, and for me it came off to John 3, you want to live in the light and fully in the light. But I remember I thought that was shared with one friend, but it turned out it got talked about in the whole church without me knowing about it. And I realized that living in the light doesn't mean everyone's going to treat you with the same love of the Father. Like it doesn't, and that there's some places that have to be inner circles or safe spaces, not because you're avoiding accountability, but not everyone can handle everything that you might have to say in vulnerable kind of settings in that way. So I think that's important. And John Gottman, a marriage counselor from the 70s, the idea of turning towards people and repairing relationships, I think that's been huge for me in the sense of vulnerability. Sometimes we're always in performance mode. And so if we don't have times where we are being vulnerable or not, if there's times where I feel like I'm performing a lot and I don't have that space, it's a trigger warning. It's a red flag for me that I need to find someone to open up to. So for me, it's like there might be seasons where you have to kind of, for lack of a better thing, be focused on them and not yourself. And in those seasons, I have to be extra aware or intentional about when and how can I make sure that I'm opening up to someone if this is not the space. So I think for me, it's also just kind of monitoring that as to when and how. And yeah, so same thing, different relationships. I have one thing in Wesley where we call it a band group, where I meet with one or two others, and beyond even just my spouse, to where there's nothing that I would hold back or not say that needs to be said. So having that space already, where I meet with weekly, also is a level of accountability and permission to go there.
Yeah, well, thank you, that's good.
I've got two layers to this answer. The first one I would say is the benefit can't be understated of having a professional friend. I'm talking about a licensed therapist, a counselor, to take your heaviest vulnerability to. You get out of it what you get into. So if you're gonna sit there and half-truth everything, it's not gonna benefit you one bit. But if you're gonna go in and you're gonna really evaluate where you're at, what's going on, what's brought you to the point where you are feeling exhausted and where you have this heft of vulnerability, then you're able to process it and move through it. The second thing was, my dad always taught me that it is best to leave your heaviest burdens in the hands of the Lord. And I've always liked the idea of journaling, and I did that when I was younger, and it was a really good outlet. And one day he ended up helping me walk through some processes, and he said, this might not be something that you want to journal about, because someday your child might pick up your journal after you've passed away and realize, wow, my dad thought this. I thought my dad was perfect, which of course not. But there are some things that are best left in the hands of the Lord instead of spoken out at all, because they just amplify the negativity or the work of the enemy. You mentioned that if somebody's going to attack a vulnerability, if we don't speak it into existence, the enemy's not going to have a part in it.
Yeah.
So if we give that up to the Lord and surrender it in His name, it changes the game. So keeping those things there.
Appreciate it.
So about 6 years ago, I was serving at a church up in Spartanburg, and we were having some staff problems. My wife says most of my problems in ministry have been staff problems. And it was really weighing heavy on me, and it was so stressful that my body just kind of shut down. And so I had to go to the hospital for an overnight stay. And I remember feeling so demeaned and shamed. And I decided that the best way to kind of interact with the congregation that next Sunday when I came back was to do what I tell them to do, and that is to be authentic and be vulnerable. And so in the midst of my sermon, I shared that. And it was amazing. This wall just kind of came down with people, and they came up to me after the sermon, and they were like, I've struggled with that too. And they were able to connect, and I was able to help them in a way that if I had kept that to myself and my pride, then I wouldn't have had that freedom to share. And to just be honest with you, with the pride issue, it was prideful because as sad as it is, I almost wished I had some kind of brain tumor or something, rather than it just being stress, because I felt like that was so weak.
Yeah.
But God used that in a mighty way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm already hearing the answers to this question, like how have you ever been exhausted or discouraged? So I've heard that from you, that you have at some point in time in your ministry. If so, what brought you through it?
So I think, there's an exhaustion that you have like on a Monday morning, but every pastor feels like, I left it all on the field, and you need just a time to rest that day and get through the week. There's vacation, there's respite from that. But then there's those heavy times where you're just totally exhausted, and I think you need counsel. I think you need extended vacation, sabbatical, something to help you physically as well as spiritually and emotionally. You need to know the difference between the two. So I would say put them in two categories. Everybody has exhaustion at times, but then there's that exhaustion you really need to take care of on a serious basis.
I am. You ask if we've ever been in a series or a season. I am in a season of exhaustion, and the thing that gets you through it is you've got to eat. You've got to be in the Word. You've got to be being mentored. You've got to be being fed. And so, continuing to rely on my calling and recognizing that I'm not called to be comfortable. I'm not called to be easily walking through this. I'm called to serve, and it's a sacrifice. There are some things that have to be laid out on the field, and recognizing that I'm not toiling in vain. I'm not beating my head against a wall for no reason. I'm taking ground for the kingdom, even if it's an inch, looking for those wins. Those things refuel, even in the midst of a season that's really difficult and really confusing and exhausting. Those kind of things really are able to inspire me to keep going, as well as the support from my family and the local church.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, I know it's not as simple as this, but I heard one pastor talking about how the things that control us usually are the things that give us, have power over us financially and permission-wise. So there's a sense of when we are feeling tired or exhausted or burnout, a lot of times we are feeling a financial pinch and or a lack of permission to really take care of ourselves for a variety of reasons. And so at some point that relief is needed. So there's been times where I definitely have gone to my parents' house when I was working my PhD, and they had a little more time and space for the financial resources to be fed while I'm just focused on something, and that extra space of someone providing for you and giving you permission to not feel like you have to carry the extra responsibilities. It can look at a variety of ways. It doesn't have to be your parents' house, but there does seem to be someone or something that has to give you permission to do what's necessary to take care of yourself. And sometimes we want relief, but sometimes it's not like you pause everything else. You just have to say no to everything else in the midst of that. So there's some things we have to be, I think as pastors, sometimes we can be worried about people pleasing. Yeah. And sometimes at the end of the day, you have to be very okay. Okay, meaning it's going to happen. You're going to disappoint or let some people down to take care of yourself. I feel like it's not, I don't think you get to take care of yourself and make everyone happy. Right. When you have to prioritize yourself, someone's going to be frustrated or disappointed or feel like you should have been able to do more than what you did.
Yeah. Mike, because of time, we need to ask, does anybody have any questions that are out in the audience? All right. Are you okay if we...
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think there are two things that come to my mind. There are two moments in my life, at least, and hopefully it doesn't sound overly spiritual, but it really was for me when I remember these moments, and they were very tough moments. One was when I was a pastor, and I had one large family in the church that didn't just act like they hated me. They came to my face and told me every Sunday, just to make it known. So, and then because there was a type of theology I wouldn't engage in. But then when I was on active duty, and a supervisor that ate my lunch, I mean, every single day, it was nothing but torment. And I mean, so much so that I was even having to go to the doctor to find out, because I had bleeding ulcers and all kinds of different stuff going on. And, but the thing that I relied on, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional, but the thing I remember so distinctly is I know my identity was not based on what they thought of me.
Yes.
It was what God thought.
That's good.
So it was a deep-seated belief that God loved me and that He called me.
Yes.
So whatever, whether it was in pastoral ministry or in the chaplaincy, it was a calling on my life, and I wouldn't back down unless God was calling me out of it.
Yeah.
So I believe that God, for example, for that family, I believe God was calling me to stay in the church and to love that family unconditionally, the way I think God wants us to love people.
Amen.
But I think those are the two things. One is believing in a great and awesome God, because we do have it. And then secondly, remember your calling and stay with your calling. Trust your calling, that the Lord has called you, not anyone else.
Amen. And we can close that session. Would you let them know how you must be